My name is Zenobia Crawford, and I'm 72 years old. For 50 years, my family erased me from their history. They removed my name from family trees, deleted me from photo albums, and told everyone I'd never existed. They buried my name because I'd embarrassed them, because I'd made choices they didn't approve of, because I'd refused to live the life they'd planned for me. For 5 decades, I lived in obscurity while my family thrived. They built successful businesses, gained social prominence, and created a legacy, all while pretending I'd never been part of their story. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed. I became famous overnight, not just locally famous, internationally famous. My face appeared on news channels around the world. My story went viral on social media. My name was suddenly everywhere. And my family, who'd spent 50 years pretending I didn't exist, panicked. They called me frantically. They showed up at my door unannounced. They begged me to acknowledge them, to claim them as family, to share my sudden fame and fortune. "Zenobia, we've always been proud of you," my sister Dovie said on the phone, her voice desperate. "We never stopped thinking about you. We never stopped loving you." "Really?" I asked calmly. "Because for 50 years you told people I was dead. You removed every trace of me from the family history. You pretended I'd never been born." "That was a misunderstanding," Dovie stammered. "We were hurt by your choices, but we never stopped caring." "Don't lie to me now," I interrupted. "You buried my name, you erased me, and you only care now because I'm suddenly valuable to you." "That's not true," Dovie protested. "We want to reconnect. We want to be a family again." "Where were you for the past 50 years?" I asked. "Where were you when I needed family, when I was struggling, when I was alone?" "We didn't know where you were," Dovie said weakly. "You didn't look," I corrected, "because you didn't care. But now that I'm famous, now that I'm worth something to you, suddenly you want to be family." "Zenobia, please," Dovie begged. "Don't shut us out. We're your family. We deserve to be part of your success." "Deserve?" I repeated. "What exactly have you done to deserve anything from me?" Dovie had no answer. Because the truth was simple. My family had abandoned me 50 years ago. They'd erased my existence, dismissed my value, and moved on without me. Now they wanted back in, not because they loved me, but because I'd become a legend overnight. And they were panicking because I had all the power. I could claim them or deny them. I could share my success or keep it for myself. I could forgive them or make them pay for 50 years of erasure. The choice was entirely mine. But to understand why my family buried my name in the first place, and why my sudden fame terrified them so much, I need to take you back to where this story really began. I was born in 1953 in Charleston, South Carolina, into the Crawford family, a prominent family of doctors, lawyers, and business owners who'd been influential in the city for 3 generations. My father, Sterling Crawford, was a successful surgeon. My mother, Pearl Crawford, came from old Charleston money. My older siblings, Dovie, Artie, and Royal, were all being groomed to continue the family's legacy of success and social prominence. As the youngest, born when my mother was 43, I was something of an afterthought. But I was still expected to follow the family plan, attend a good college, marry someone suitable, contribute to the family's reputation. I had different plans. I was artistic, creative. I loved painting, writing, music. I spent my teenage years creating art instead of studying business or medicine like my siblings. "Zenobia, art is a hobby, not a career," my father told me repeatedly. "You need to focus on something practical." "Art is practical to me," I'd argue. "It's what I love, it's what I'm good at." "Being good at something doesn't make it a viable career," my mother said. "You need to think about your future, about marriage, family, social standing." "I don't care about social standing," I said. "I care about creating something meaningful." "That's because you're young and naive," my father said dismissively. "You'll understand when you're older that reputation and status matter." But I never came to understand that, because to me, creating art mattered more than maintaining appearances. When I graduated high school in 1971, My family expected me to attend one of the prestigious Southern universities they'd all attended. Maybe University of Virginia, or Vanderbilt, or Duke. Instead, I announced I'd been accepted to an art school in New York City. Absolutely not, my father said immediately. You're not going to some bohemian art school in New York. You're going to a real university. The art school is real, I protested. It's one of the best in the country. It's a waste of time and money, my mother said. Art school doesn't lead anywhere. You need a real education. This is a real education, I insisted, in something I actually care about. You'll go to University of Virginia like your sister Dovie, my father decided. You'll study something useful, and that's final. But it wasn't final, because I'd already made my decision. 2 weeks before I was supposed to start at University of Virginia, I packed my bags, took the money I'd saved from summer jobs, and got on a bus to New York City. I left a note. I'm going to art school. I'm going to follow my dreams. I love you, but I can't live the life you've planned for me. Zenobia. My father called 3 days after I arrived in New York. I'd been staying at the YWCA, working on getting my art school registration finalized. Come home immediately, my father commanded. You've embarrassed this family. You've made us a laughingstock. How have I embarrassed you? I asked. By pursuing my education. By running away like a child, my father shouted. By rejecting everything we've offered you. By choosing some ridiculous art school over a real education. It's not ridiculous to me, I said firmly. This is my life, my choice. You're 18 years old, my father said. You don't know what you want. You're throwing away your future for some fantasy about being an artist. Maybe I am, I said, but it's my fantasy to chase. Then chase it alone, my father said coldly. If you stay in New York, if you go to that art school, you're no longer part of this family. We won't support you financially. We won't claim you as our daughter. You'll be on your own. That's not fair, I protested. You're my family. You can't just disown me for making my own choices. We're not disowning you, my father corrected. You're disowning us. By rejecting everything we've given you, everything we've planned for you, everything we represent, you're choosing to not be a Crawford. So if you want to be an artist more than you want to be part of this family, that's your choice, he continued. But you can't have both. Either come home, go to University of Virginia and be our daughter, or stay in New York, go to art school and be nothing to us. I'm going to art school, I said, my voice shaking but determined. Then you're no longer our daughter, my father said, and he hung up. I waited for my mother or siblings to call. To tell me this was too extreme, that we could work something out, that family was more important than disagreements about education. No one called. A week later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer. The Crawford family hereby severs all legal and financial ties with Zenobia Crawford, effective immediately. Zenobia Crawford is no longer considered a member of the Crawford family and has no claim to family assets, properties, or inheritance. The family requests no further contact. They'd actually done it. They'd legally disowned me, cut me off completely, erased me from the family. I was 18, alone in New York, with no financial support and no family to fall back on. But I had my art, and I had my determination. So I stayed. The next 10 years were the hardest of my life. Art school was expensive. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing, cleaning, retail, while attending classes. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate 1 meal a day to save money. I lived in the cheapest apartments I could find. But I was learning, growing as an artist, developing my voice and style. I specialized in painting, large, bold, emotional works that combined abstract expressionism with social commentary. My professors said I had talent, but talent didn't pay bills. After graduating in 1975, I tried to make it as a professional artist. I showed my work in small galleries, participated in group shows, sold paintings occasionally for small amounts. But I couldn't make a sustainable living. By 1980, I was 30 years old and barely surviving. I thought about going home, apologizing to my family, admitting they'd been right about art being impractical. But every time I considered it, I'd remember my father's cold voice. "You're no longer our daughter." They'd erased me. They'd made their choice, and I refused to crawl back and validate that choice by admitting failure. So I kept going. I took a day job teaching art at a community center to pay bills. I painted at night. I kept creating even though no one was buying. And slowly, very slowly, things started to change. In 1985, when I was 32, I had my first real breakthrough. A small but respected gallery in Soho agreed to give me a solo show. It wasn't a major gallery, but it was legitimate. Real art critics would attend. I poured everything into that show. I created 15 large paintings exploring themes of family, rejection, identity, and resilience. I titled the series Buried Names, a reference to my own experience of being erased by my family. The show opened on a Friday night. About 40 people attended, a decent turnout for an unknown artist. One of those attendees was Winnie Marshall, an influential art critic for a major New York newspaper. Winnie spent 20 minutes studying my paintings. Then she approached me. "These are powerful," Winnie said. "Raw, honest. They speak to something real, not just aesthetic games." "Thank you," I said, trying not to seem too desperate for validation. "I'm going to write about this show," Winnie said. "I think people need to see your work." Her review appeared in the Sunday paper. "Zenobia Crawford, a voice worth hearing." The review was glowing. Winnie called my work emotionally devastating and technically masterful. She compared me to major artists. She predicted I had a significant career ahead. The Monday after that review, I sold 6 paintings. By Wednesday, all 15 were sold. The gallery asked if I had more work. Suddenly, after years of struggle, I was a name in the New York art world. Not famous, not rich, but known, respected, starting to build a real career. From 1985 to 2020, I built my career slowly and steadily. I had more gallery shows. My work was acquired by museums. I won grants and awards. I became known as an important voice in contemporary painting, not a superstar, but a serious artist whose work mattered. I made enough to live comfortably, not wealthy, but secure. I bought a small house in Brooklyn. I had a studio where I could paint full-time. I had a community of fellow artists and friends. I never married, never had children. Art was my life, my family, my legacy. And my biological family, I never heard from them, not once in 35 years. I occasionally looked them up online. The Crawford family was still prominent in Charleston. My siblings had all done well. Dovie was a successful lawyer. Artie ran a real estate company. Royal was a doctor like our father. They'd maintained the family reputation, built the legacy our parents wanted. And they'd never mentioned me. When I found articles about the family, I wasn't in them. The family tree on their company website showed my parents having 3 children, not 4. They'd buried my name completely, as if I'd never existed. I told myself I didn't care, that I'd built my own life, my own success, my own meaning without them. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder, did they ever think about me? Did they ever regret erasing me? Did they ever wish they'd chosen differently? I'd never know, because they never reached out. Until 3 weeks ago, when everything changed. 3 weeks ago, I was working in my studio when I received an email from Homer Chen, the director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. "Ms. Crawford, I'm writing to inform you that you've been selected for a major honor. The Rockefeller Foundation and MoMA are jointly awarding you the Lifetime Achievement Award for Contemporary Painting. The award comes with a $2 million prize and a major retrospective of your work at MoMA." I read the email 3 times, certain I'd misunderstood. The Lifetime Achievement Award was one of the most prestigious honors in the art world. Past recipients included some of the most famous artists of the 20th century. And they were giving it to me, Zenobia Crawford, the girl who'd been disowned for going to art school. The announcement was made the next day. Within hours, it was international news. Unknown artist wins major award. Zenobia Crawford, from obscurity to legend. 70-year-old painter receives $2 million Lifetime Achievement Award. My phone exploded with calls from reporters, galleries, collectors, museums. My email inbox had hundreds of messages. My name was trending on social media. I'd spent 50 years building a career in relative obscurity. Suddenly, overnight, I was famous. And that's when my family appeared. The calls started 2 days after the award announcement. First, my sister Dovie called. I hadn't spoken to her in 50 years. But she acted like it had been weeks. "Zenobia, congratulations on your award," Dovie gushed. "We're so proud of you. We always knew you were talented." "Really?" I asked, my voice icy. "Because you haven't spoken to me in 50 years. "That's not true," Dovie protested. "We've thought about you constantly. We didn't know how to reach you." "I've lived in Brooklyn for 35 years, I said. "I'm not hard to find." "Well, we're so happy to reconnect now," Dovie said, ignoring my point. "We'd love to see you. Maybe you could come visit Charleston. The whole family is excited to see you." "The whole family that legally disowned me and erased me from family records?" I asked. "That was a long time ago," Dovie said uncomfortably. "We were all young. Things were different then." "You're still claiming me on the family tree?" I asked. "Or am I still buried?" Silence. "I thought so," I said. "Goodbye, Dovie." "Wait," Dovie said desperately. "Zenobia, we're family. We want to celebrate your success. We want to be part of your life." "You had 50 years to be part of my life," I said. "You chose not to. Now it's my choice. And I choose the same thing you chose, to pretend you don't exist." I hung up. But the calls kept coming. My brothers Artie and Royal both called. Cousins I hadn't heard from in decades called. Even people claiming to be second and third cousins reached out. All with the same message. "We're so proud of you. We always believed in you. We want to reconnect." All lies. Convenient lies now that I was suddenly worth knowing. 1 week after the award announcement, my sister Dovie showed up at my house in Brooklyn. I opened the door to find her standing there with a forced smile, looking nervous. "Zenobia, we need to talk," Dovie said. "No, we don't," I replied, starting to close the door. "Please," Dovie said, putting her hand on the door. "5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I let her in. Dovie sat in my living room, looking around at my art-filled home with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've done well for yourself," Dovie observed. "No thanks to my family," I said. "I know you're angry," Dovie began, "and you have every right to be. What we did 50 years ago was wrong." "You think?" I asked sarcastically. "We were young," Dovie continued. "We were following Daddy's lead. We thought you were being foolish, throwing away your future." "So you erased me," I said, "completely." "We thought you'd come back," Dovie said. "We thought you'd realize art wasn't practical and come home, but you never did." "Because I wasn't welcome," I pointed out. "You legally disowned me. You buried my name. You made sure I knew I wasn't part of the family anymore." "That was Daddy," Dovie said, "not us." "You went along with it," I said. "You all did. For 50 years, not one of you reached out. Not one of you said maybe we were too harsh. Not one of you cared if I was alive or dead." "That's not fair," Dovie protested. "It's completely fair," I said. "And now, suddenly, because I'm famous and wealthy, you all want to be family again. It's transparent and pathetic." "We want to make amends," Dovie said. "We want to reconnect. Zenobia, we're your family. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It used to," I said. 50 years ago, it meant everything. That's why it hurts so much when you all chose to erase me. But now you're just people who share some DNA, nothing more." "That's harsh," Dovie said, tears forming in her eyes. "You were harsher," I said. "You told the world I didn't exist. Now I'm returning the favor." "Is that what you're going to tell the media?" Dovie asked, and I heard panic in her voice. "Are you going to tell them about us, about what we did?" "Why?" I asked. Are you worried about how it will make the family look? Dovey's silence confirmed my suspicion. That's what this is really about, isn't it? I realized. You're not here because you care about me. You're here because you're panicking. Because my sudden fame puts a spotlight on the Crawford family. And you're terrified I'll tell everyone that the respectable Crawford family disowned their youngest daughter for becoming an artist. People are already asking questions, Dovey admitted. Why you're not on the family tree, why we never mentioned having a sister, why we haven't been part of your success. And you're worried about your precious reputation, I said. Zenobia, please, Dovey begged. We made a mistake 50 years ago, but if you tell everyone about it now, you'll destroy the family. Our businesses are standing in Charleston. Everything we've built will be tainted by this scandal. Good, I said coldly. Maybe you should have thought about that before you buried my name. Dovey stood up, her expression hardening. If you go public with this, you'll regret it. We have lawyers. We have influence. We can make your life very difficult. Try it, I said. I have the truth. And right now, the world is listening to everything I say. Do you really want to threaten me? Dovey stared at me for a long moment, clearly struggling between anger and fear. This isn't over, Dovey finally said, walking to the door. We're not going to let you destroy everything our family has built. Your family, I corrected. Not mine. You made sure of that 50 years ago. Dovey left, slamming the door behind her. And I realized my family wasn't just panicking because I was famous. They were terrified because I had the power to expose them, to tell the world what they'd done, to destroy their carefully maintained reputation with the truth. The question was, what would I do with that power? This story is just beginning. Subscribe now. Hit that like button and turn on NOTFICTONS. Drop a comment. Should Zenobia expose her family or forgive them? Would you reconnect with family who erased you? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Australia? Let me know. 2 days after Dovey's visit, I received an unexpected call from Artie Marshall, a journalist from the New York Times. Ms. Crawford, I'm writing a profile piece about you for our Sunday magazine, Artie explained. The story of your award, your career, your journey. I'd love to interview you. A profile, I asked. Yes, from obscurity to legend, the Zenobia Crawford story, Artie said. It'll be a major piece, cover story, extensive interview, photos. This award has made you one of the most talked about artists in the world right now. When would you want to do this interview? I asked. As soon as possible, Artie said. Ideally this week. The piece would run in 2 weeks. I thought about it. A major New York Times profile would cement my place in art history. It would be the definitive telling of my story. And it would be my chance to tell the truth about my family. I'll do it, I said, on one condition. What's that? Artie asked. I want complete honesty in the piece. I said, no sanitizing my story to make it more palatable. If I tell you something difficult or controversial, I want it included. Of course, Artie agreed. That's how we do journalism, we tell the truth. Good, I said, because my truth includes some things my family won't like. 3 days later, Artie came to my Brooklyn home for the interview. We sat in my studio, surrounded by 50 years of my artwork, and I told my story. I told him about growing up in Charleston in a prominent family, about my love for art, about choosing art school over my family's expectations. And then I told him about the disownment. They legally cut me off, Artie asked, his pen pausing over his notebook. Your own family. Yes, I confirmed. I was 18. They sent me a letter from a lawyer saying I was no longer considered part of the Crawford family. No inheritance, no contact. They erased me completely. Have you had any contact with them since? Artie asked. Not for 50 years, I said. Until last week when my award was announced. Suddenly they all started calling, wanting to reconnect, claiming they'd always been proud of me. But they hadn't contacted you in 5 decades, Artie said, clearly understanding the hypocrisy. Exactly, I said. They buried my name when I was worthless to them. Now that I'm famous and wealthy, they want back in. How did that make you feel? Artie asked. Angry, I admitted, and vindicated, because their panic proves what I always knew. They didn't disown me because of principle. They disowned me because I embarrassed them. And now I have the power to embarrass them far worse. Are you going to? Artie asked. I'm telling you the story, aren't I? I said. The world is going to know what the Crawford family did to their youngest daughter. Artie took notes furiously. This is quite a story. Do your family members know you're telling it publicly? My sister Dovie came to my house and threatened me if I went public, I said. She told me they have lawyers and influence, that I'd regret exposing them. And you're doing it anyway, Artie observed. I spent 50 years being erased, I said. I'm done being silent to protect people who never protected me. 2 days after my interview, I received a call from Dovie. Did you give an interview to the New York Times? Dovie demanded without preamble. I did, I confirmed. What did you tell them? Dovie asked, panic clear in her voice. The truth, I said simply. Zenobia, you can't, Dovie said desperately. If you tell the media about the disownment, about what happened 50 years ago, you'll destroy us. You destroyed me first, I pointed out. That was different, Dovie protested. You were one person, we're a whole family. Our businesses, our reputations, our children, everyone will be affected by this scandal. Maybe you should have thought about that before burying my name, I said. We'll sue, Dovie threatened. For defamation, for invasion of privacy. We have lawyers who can make this very expensive for you. Sue me for telling the truth about what you did, I asked. Good luck with that. Besides, I have $2 million coming from my award. I can afford lawyers now, too. Why are you doing this? Dovie asked, her voice breaking. What do you want from us? I don't want anything from you, I said. That's what you don't understand. I'm not trying to extort you or get back into the family. I'm just telling my story. If that story makes you look bad, that's because what you did was bad. We'll deny it, Dovie said. We'll say you're lying, that you're bitter and making up stories. You sent me a legal letter disowning me, I reminded her. I kept it for 50 years. I have documentation, Dovie. Your denials won't matter. The line went silent for a long moment. What do you want? Dovie finally asked. Name your price. What will it take for you to not tell this story? There is no price, I said, because this isn't about money. This is about the truth. For 50 years, you got to control the narrative. You got to erase me and pretend I never existed. Now it's my turn to tell my story, and you can't buy my silence. You're going to regret this, Dovie said, but her voice had lost its threatening edge. Now she just sounded defeated. No, I said. I think I'm going to feel free for the first time in 50 years. I hung up. 1 week after my interview, the New York Times sent me a draft of the article for fact-checking. I read it 3 times, my emotions swinging between vindication and sadness. Artie had told my story completely and honestly. He'd included everything: the disownment, the legal severance, the 50 years of erasure, the sudden reappearance of my family after my award. The article was titled, Zenobia Crawford, the artist her family forgot. The piece opened with this paragraph. When Zenobia Crawford was 18, her prominent Charleston family gave her an ultimatum: abandon her dreams of becoming an artist or be cut off completely. She chose art. They chose to erase her. For 50 years, the Crawford family literally buried her name, removing her from family trees, telling people she didn't exist, legally disowning her. Then, 3 weeks ago, Zenobia won one of the most prestigious awards in contemporary art. Suddenly, the family that forgot her wanted to remember. But Zenobia Crawford isn't interested in reconciliation. She's interested in telling the truth. It was perfect, factual, powerful, and completely damning to my family. This is accurate, I told Artie when he called to confirm. You can publish it. You're sure? Artie asked. Once this runs, there's no taking it back. Your family will face significant public scrutiny. I'm sure, I said firmly. Publish it. The article ran in the Sunday New York Times Magazine. It was the cover story, featuring a large photograph of me in my studio with the headline, "The artist her family forgot." Within hours, the story went viral. The response to the article was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with reactions. "The Crawford family is disgusting. They erased their own daughter for following her dreams." Zenobia Crawford is a legend, building a 50-year career after being completely abandoned by her family. That's strength. "I hope the Crawford family is embarrassed. They deserve to be exposed for what they did." "This story breaks my heart. Imagine being disowned for going to art school." News outlets picked up the story. Television programs discussed it. Opinion pieces were written analyzing family rejection and the pressure to conform to family expectations. My phone exploded with interview requests. CNN, BBC, NPR, Good Morning America. Everyone wanted to talk to me about my family and my story. I accepted several interviews, repeating my story each time. With each telling, the public's sympathy for me grew and their anger toward my family intensified. And my family. They were in full crisis mode. 3 days after the article published, my brother Artie held a press conference in Charleston. I watched it live on television from my Brooklyn home. Artie stood at a podium with my other siblings beside him, Dovie and Royal, all looking uncomfortable and defensive. "We're here to address recent media coverage regarding our sister Zenobia," Artie began. "While we're proud of her accomplishments and happy about her recent award, some of the statements in recent articles are inaccurate and taken out of context. The family did not erase or forget Zenobia," Artie continued, lying smoothly. "There was a family disagreement 50 years ago about educational choices. These things happen in families, but we never stopped caring about Zenobia or considering her part of the family. We're disappointed that she's chosen to characterize a private family matter in such a public and hurtful way," Artie added. "We've reached out to reconcile, but those efforts have been rejected." Then Dovie spoke. "Zenobia is our sister and we love her. We wish her well. But we also want the public to understand that family disagreements are complicated. There are always two sides to every story." The implication was clear. They were suggesting I was lying or exaggerating. But the reporters at the press conference weren't buying it. "Mr. Crawford, did your family send Zenobia a legal letter disowning her?" one reporter asked. Artie hesitated. "That letter was sent 50 years ago in the context of a heated family dispute. It doesn't reflect." "But it was sent," the reporter pressed. "Yes, but..." "And did your family remove Zenobia from family records? From the family tree on your company website?" another reporter asked. "Those records were updated periodically based on..." Dovie started. "Based on pretending your sister didn't exist," the reporter interrupted. The press conference deteriorated from there. My siblings couldn't explain away the facts. They'd legally disowned me. They'd erased me from family records. They'd had no contact for 50 years until I became famous. No amount of PR spin could make that look good. The fallout for my family's businesses was immediate and severe. The Crawford law firm, where Dovie was a senior partner, lost 3 major clients within a week. The clients issued statements saying they couldn't work with a firm that represented family values while having disowned one of their own children. Crawford Properties, Artie's real estate company, faced protests. People showed up with signs reading, "Don't buy from a family that erases their own." Even Royal's medical practice suffered. Patients started requesting different doctors, uncomfortable with someone who'd participated in disowning his own sister. The Crawford family name, carefully cultivated over 3 generations, was now associated with cruelty and hypocrisy. And it was all because they'd panicked when I became a legend overnight. If they'd simply stayed quiet, acknowledged me privately, and let me enjoy my success without trying to claim credit, none of this would have happened. But they'd threatened me, tried to silence me, attempted to control the narrative. And that's when I decided to tell the world exactly who they were. 1 week after the Times article, I received an email from my brother Royal. Zenobia, I'm writing to you personally, not as part of the family's public response. I want to apologize for what we did 50 years ago and for how we've handled your recent success. You're right about everything. We did erase you. We did treat you terribly, and we only reached out when it benefited us. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to understand that we were young, following our parents' lead, and we made terrible choices that we've compounded over 5 decades. If there's anything I can do to make amends, please let me know. Your brother, Royal. I read the email several times, trying to determine if it was sincere or just another attempt at damage control. I decided to respond. Royal, thank you for your email. I appreciate the apology, even if it's 50 years late. But here's what you need to understand. You didn't just hurt me 50 years ago. You've been hurting me continuously for 5 decades by maintaining the erasure. Every year you updated family records without me. Every holiday you celebrated without acknowledging my existence. Every time someone asked if you had other siblings and you said no, that was a choice to keep hurting me. You had 50 years to make this right. You chose not to. Only now, when your reputation is suffering, do you care about making amends. So no, there's nothing you can do. The damage is done. And you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices, just like I've had to live with the consequences of mine. Zenobia. I sent the email and felt a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that and might never be. But closure in finally saying what I'd needed to say for 50 years. 2 weeks after the Times article, the Museum of Modern Art held the opening reception for my retrospective exhibition. Over 500 people attended: artists, collectors, critics, celebrities, and art lovers. It was the biggest moment of my career. I stood in the main gallery, surrounded by 50 years of my work, paintings that chronicled my journey from a disowned 18-year-old to a celebrated 72-year-old artist. The series Buried Names from 1985 had a prominent place in the exhibition. These paintings, created in the wake of my first breakthrough, explored themes of family rejection and identity erasure. Looking at them now, with my current story public knowledge, they took on new meaning. The critics noticed. These paintings were always powerful, Homer Chen, the museum director, said during his speech. But knowing Zenobia's story, knowing that Buried Names referred to her own experience of being erased by her family, they become devastating. Zenobia Crawford didn't just create art, Homer continued. She created art despite being told she didn't matter, despite being abandoned by everyone who should have supported her, despite 50 years of being erased. And now, finally, the world sees her, Homer concluded, not as someone's forgotten daughter, but as a legend in her own right. The audience applauded. Several people were crying, moved by my story and my work. As I looked around the gallery, I felt a profound sense of achievement, not just in my art, but in my life. I'd done it. I'd built a career and a legacy despite everything. I'd proven my family wrong. I'd shown that following your dreams, even when everyone abandons you, can lead somewhere meaningful. And then I saw them. At the back of the gallery, trying to blend into the crowd, were Dovey, Artie, and Royal. My siblings had come to my exhibition. I made my way through the crowd to where my siblings stood, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "What are you doing here?" I asked quietly. "We wanted to see your work," Dovey said, "to understand what you've built." "Now you care," I asked, "after 50 years and a public scandal." "We've always cared," Artie insisted, though the lie was obvious. "You cared so much you legally disowned me and erased me from family records," I said. "Your actions speak louder than your words." "We made a mistake," Royal said. "A terrible mistake that we've compounded over 50 years. But Zenobia, we're family. Doesn't that mean we deserve a chance to make things right?" "You had 50 years of chances," I said. "You chose not to take any of them." "So you're going to punish us forever?" Dovey asked. You're going to use your fame to destroy our reputations and never give us a chance at redemption. I'm not punishing you, I corrected. I'm just telling the truth about what you did. If the truth destroys your reputation, that's because your actions were destructive. We want to make amends, Artie said. Tell us what you want: money, public apologies, reinstatement in the family records. What will it take? I looked at my 3 siblings, people I'd once loved, who'd once been my family, who'd chosen to erase me rather than support me. I don't want anything from you, I said. That's what you don't understand. I'm not trying to punish you or extort you. I'm simply living my life and telling my truth. If you want to make amends, that's between you and your conscience, I continued. But I don't need your money, your apologies, or your validation. I built a life without you. I became successful without you. I made a name for myself, the name you tried to bury. So enjoy the exhibition, I concluded. Look at 50 years of work created by someone you claimed didn't exist, and understand that everything I achieved despite you, not because of you. I walked away, leaving them standing in the gallery surrounded by evidence of the life I'd built without them. This story is getting more intense. Subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Is Zenobia being too harsh or exactly right? Do her siblings deserve forgiveness? Where are you watching from? 3 weeks after my museum exhibition opening, I received an unexpected letter. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter, delivered by courier to my Brooklyn home. The return address was Charleston, South Carolina, but it wasn't from any of my siblings. It was from my nephew Sterling Crawford, Artie's son, who would be about 40 years old now. I'd never met him, of course, since I'd been erased from the family before he was born. I opened the letter with curiosity. Dear Aunt Zenobia, I know you don't know me. I'm Artie's oldest son. I'm writing to you because I think you deserve to hear from someone in the family who understands what you've been through. I only learned about you 3 weeks ago when the New York Times article came out. My whole life, I was told my father had 2 siblings, Aunt Dovie and Uncle Royal. No one ever mentioned you. When I was a teenager, I found an old photo in my grandmother's things. 4 children standing together. I asked who the 4th child was. My father said it was a family friend who'd moved away. I never questioned it. But when I saw that photo in the Times article and realized the family friend was actually my father's sister, someone who'd been completely erased from our family history, I felt sick. I've spent the past 3 weeks learning about you, reading about your art, your career, your struggle, and I'm ashamed of what my father and his siblings did to you. I wanted to write to tell you, you have family members who support you. My siblings and I and many of our cousins were horrified by what our parents did. We don't blame you for exposing them. They deserve to be exposed. I also wanted you to know that the younger generation of Crawfords is working to make things right. We've insisted that you be reinstated on the family tree. We're documenting your existence in family records. We're telling the truth about what happened. And we're setting up a scholarship fund in your name at the Charleston School of the Arts. We want to help young artists who have been rejected by their families follow their dreams anyway. I don't expect forgiveness on behalf of my father. He doesn't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that not all of us agree with what was done to you. If you ever want to meet your nephews and nieces, people who admire you and are proud to be related to you, we'd be honored. Your nephew, Sterling Crawford. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. For 50 years, I'd assumed the entire Crawford family was complicit in my erasure. It had never occurred to me that there might be a younger generation who didn't know I existed, who'd been lied to just like I'd been erased. This letter changed something. It didn't erase 50 years of pain, but it showed me that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from my exposure of the family's secrets. 1 week after receiving Sterling's letter, I agreed to meet him. We met at a cafe in Manhattan, neutral territory. I arrived early, nervous about meeting my nephew for the first time. Sterling walked in at exactly noon. He was tall, professional-looking, with kind eyes that reminded me of my father before bitterness had hardened him. "Aunt Zenobia," Sterling approached hesitantly. "Sterling," I acknowledged. We sat down, the awkwardness palpable. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Sterling said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But your letter moved me. It showed me a perspective I hadn't considered." "The perspective of the children who were lied to?" Sterling asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "I spent 50 years angry at the family that erased me, but I never thought about the family members who never knew I existed, who were kept in the dark about my existence." "There are 12 of us," Sterling said. 12 grandchildren. None of us knew about you until the article. We were all shocked and angry when we learned the truth." "How did your parents react to your anger?" I asked. "Defensively," Sterling said. "Dad tried to justify it, said it was complicated, that you'd rejected the family first, that they were protecting us from someone who'd made poor choices." "Poor choices like becoming an artist," I said bitterly. "Exactly," Sterling agreed. "Which is absurd. You won one of the most prestigious awards in contemporary art. You're literally famous for the poor choice they disowned you for." "Did your father acknowledge that?" I asked. "Eventually," Sterling said. "After I pointed out that his sister is more successful and respected than any of us will probably ever be. That seemed to hit him." "Good," I said. Sterling pulled out his phone. "Can I show you something?" "What?" He showed me a website. "This is the new Crawford family website. Look at the family tree section." I looked, and there, finally, after 50 years of erasure, was my name. Zenobia Crawford, born 1953, listed alongside my siblings. "We insisted," Sterling explained. "All of the grandchildren. We told our parents that if they didn't publicly acknowledge your existence, we'd disown them the way they disowned you." "You threatened your own parents?" I asked, surprised. "We did," Sterling confirmed, "because what they did was wrong, and we weren't going to be complicit in continuing the erasure." "How did they react?" "They were furious," Sterling admitted. "But they also realized they had no choice. If they wanted relationships with their children and grandchildren, they had to acknowledge the truth." "So they updated the family records," I said, looking at my name on the screen. "More than that," Sterling said. "They've agreed to issue a public statement. A real apology, not the defensive PR statement they made before. They're going to admit they were wrong, apologize publicly, and commit to making amends." "Why?" I asked skeptically. "They've spent 3 weeks trying to minimize what they did. Why the sudden change?" "Because we forced them," Sterling said simply. "The younger generation told them, apologize genuinely or lose us. Those were the options." I sat back, processing this. My siblings, who'd spent 50 years refusing to admit they were wrong, were being forced to apologize by their own children. "When is this statement happening?" I asked. 2 days from now," Sterling said. "There's going to be a press conference in Charleston. All 3 of them, Dad, Aunt Dovie, and Uncle Royal, will apologize publicly for what they did to you." "And you want me to be there?" I guessed. "We were hoping you'd consider it," Sterling said. "Not for them, for us, the younger generation. We want to meet you, acknowledge you as family, show you that not all Crawfords are like our parents." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse, to let them apologize without my presence. But another part, the part that had spent 50 years wanting acknowledgement, wanted to be there. To hear them finally admit they were wrong. "I'll think about it," I said. 2 days later, I stood in the back of a press conference room in Charleston, watching my 3 siblings prepare to apologize publicly for disowning me 50 years ago. The room was packed with journalists, cameras, and members of the Crawford family's younger generation. Sterling stood beside me, providing moral support. Artie approached the podium first. "Thank you all for coming," Artie began, looking noticeably uncomfortable. "My siblings and I are here today to address the situation regarding our sister Zenobia and to issue a public apology for actions we took 50 years ago. In 1971, Our sister Zenobia chose to attend art school in New York instead of following the path our parents had planned for her, Artie continued. In response, our father disowned her, and we, Dovey, Royal, and I, went along with it. We didn't just go along with it, Artie clarified. We participated actively in erasing her from our family. We removed her from family records. We told people she didn't exist. We spent 50 years pretending our sister had never been born. This was wrong, Artie said, his voice cracking slightly. Profoundly, unforgivably wrong. Zenobia was 18 years old. She'd done nothing except choose her own path, and we responded by erasing her existence. Dovey approached the podium next. I want to add a personal apology, Dovey said. 3 weeks ago, when Zenobia became famous, I called her. I showed up at her home, and instead of apologizing for 50 years of erasure, I asked her to protect our reputation. I actually threatened her with lawsuits if she told the truth about what we'd done. That was wrong, Dovey continued. Zenobia had every right to tell her story. She had every right to expose what we did. And instead of accepting that, I tried to silence her again, just like we'd been silencing her for 50 years. I'm sorry, Zenobia, Dovey said, looking directly at where I stood in the back of the room. Not because your fame forced me to apologize, but because I finally understand the magnitude of what we did to you. Royal was last. I want to acknowledge something specific, Royal said. For 50 years, people asked us about our family. How many siblings do you have? Tell us about your brothers and sisters. And every time we said, I have 2 siblings, erasing Zenobia with every answer. That wasn't a passive erasure, Royal explained. That was an active choice we made thousands of times over 5 decades. Every holiday, every family gathering, every public appearance, we chose to pretend Zenobia didn't exist. And when she won one of the most prestigious awards in contemporary art, when she became internationally famous, our first instinct wasn't to celebrate her success, Royal said. It was to panic about our reputation, to try to control her story, to ask what we could get from her fame. That's shameful, Royal concluded. And I'm ashamed. Zenobia, if you're listening, and I believe you're here today, I'm sorry. You deserved better from your brothers. You deserved better from your family. All 3 siblings stood at the podium together. We can't undo 50 years of erasure, Artie said. But we can commit to doing better going forward. We've reinstated Zenobia on all family records. We're establishing a scholarship fund in her name. And we're working to repair the damage we've done, not just to Zenobia, but to our own children who we lied to about their aunt's existence. We're also committing to a substantial financial donation to arts education programs, Dovey added. Not as payment to Zenobia, nothing could compensate for what we did, but as an acknowledgement that the arts matter, that young people who choose creative paths deserve support, not erasure. Zenobia Crawford is our sister, Royal concluded. She always was, even when we pretended she wasn't, and we're grateful that despite everything we did, she's here today. Zenobia, will you join us? All eyes turned to where I stood in the back of the room. I walked slowly to the front of the room, every step feeling surreal. 50 years of erasure, and now I was being publicly acknowledged by the siblings who'd buried my name. I stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled press and family members. Thank you for your apology, I began. I want to acknowledge that apologizing publicly, admitting you were wrong in front of cameras and journalists, took courage, especially after 50 years of maintaining the opposite position. But I also want to be clear about something, I continued. This apology doesn't erase 50 years of pain. It doesn't restore the relationship we could have had. It doesn't give me back the decades I spent believing my own family considered me worthless. What it does do, I said, is provide closure, acknowledgement, validation that what was done to me was wrong, and that matters. I'm not sure I can forgive you, I admitted, looking at my siblings. Forgiveness takes time, and I need to process 50 years of hurt, but I can accept your apology, and I can appreciate that you're finally telling the truth. To the younger generation of Crawfords, I said, looking at my nephews and nieces, thank you for forcing this. Thank you for demanding truth. Thank you for refusing to participate in my erasure. You've shown more integrity than your parents did. And to anyone watching who's been rejected by their family for following their dreams, I concluded, I want you to know you can survive it. You can build a life. You can create meaning and success, despite being abandoned by people who should have supported you. My family buried my name, I said, but I dug it back up. I made it mean something. I became a legend despite them, not because of them. And if I can do that, so can you. The room erupted in applause. Journalists asked questions. Cameras flashed. And my siblings stood nearby, looking like they wanted to approach me but weren't sure if they should. Sterling came up to me first. Thank you for coming, Sterling said, and for being gracious even though you had every right not to be. I didn't do it for them, I said. I did it for you, and the other young Crawfords who deserve to know their aunt. We'd like to get to know you, Sterling said. If you're willing, no pressure, no expectations, just a chance to build relationships we should have always had. I'd like that, I said. 1 month after the public apology, the Crawford family held another press conference, this time to announce the establishment of the Zenobia Crawford Arts Scholarship Fund. The fund would provide full scholarships to young artists from families who didn't support their artistic ambitions. Priority would go to students who'd been disowned or rejected by their families for pursuing art. The initial funding was $5 million, contributed by my siblings and other family members as part of their commitment to making amends. I was invited to speak at the announcement. This scholarship means everything, I said at the press conference. Not because it has my name on it, but because it will help young people avoid what I went through. When I was 18, I had to choose between my family and my dreams, I continued. I chose my dreams and I paid a heavy price. I struggled for years. I was alone. I wondered constantly if I'd made the right choice. This scholarship will help other young artists not have to make that choice, I said. Or if they do have to make it, they'll have financial support and a community that says your dreams matter. Your art matters. We support you even if your family doesn't. That message could have changed my life 50 years ago, I concluded. I'm grateful it will change lives going forward. After the announcement, several young artists approached me, students who'd already been awarded scholarships. One young woman, Hope Martinez, told me her story. My parents disowned me last year when I chose art school over medical school, Hope said. They haven't spoken to me since. When I got this scholarship, I cried for an hour because someone finally believed in me. I believe in you, I told her. And I promise you, following your dreams, even when it's hard, even when you're alone, is worth it. Did you ever reconnect with your family? Hope asked. Not really, I admitted. They apologized publicly, which provided closure, but we don't have a relationship. Too much damage was done over too many years. Do you regret that? Hope asked. No, I said honestly, because I learned something important. You can build a family of choice. You can create meaningful relationships with people who value you for who you are, not who they want you to be. I have that now, I continued. Fellow artists, students, friends who have been my real family for 50 years. That's more valuable than biological family who only acknowledged me when I became famous. Thank you, Hope said, for sharing your story, for showing us that we can survive family rejection and still build meaningful lives. You're welcome, I said. Now go create something amazing. 6 months after winning my Lifetime Achievement Award, I sat in my Brooklyn studio, reflecting on everything that had changed. I was famous now, recognized on the street, invited to speak at universities and conferences, featured in magazines and television programs. My family had publicly apologized and attempted to make amends through the scholarship fund and other gestures. And I had connected with my nephews and nieces, building relationships with the younger generation who hadn't been part of my erasure. But the relationship with my siblings remained distant. We'd exchanged emails occasionally. They'd invited me to family events, which I'd politely declined. We were cordial but not close. And I'd made peace with that. because I'd realized something important. Forgiveness isn't always possible, and reconciliation isn't always necessary for healing. I'd spent 50 years wanting my family to acknowledge they were wrong. Now they had. That provided closure. But closure didn't mean we had to rebuild a relationship. It just meant we could both move forward, them with their guilt and attempts at redemption, me with my life and legacy. My real family was the community I'd built over 50 years, the artists who'd supported me, the students I'd mentored, the people who'd valued me for my work and my character, not for my biological connection or newfound fame. They'd been my family when my blood relatives had buried my name. They remained my family now that my name was legendary. And that was enough. Now smash that like button and turn on NOTFICTONS. Drop a comment. Did the siblings do enough to make amends? Is Zenobia right to keep her distance? Where are you watching from? 2 years had passed since I'd won the Lifetime Achievement Award. 2 years since my family had panicked when I became a legend overnight. 2 years since I'd exposed the truth about being erased for 50 years. I sat in my Brooklyn studio on a quiet morning, preparing for an event that would mark the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Today, I was 74 years old, and today, I was making a decision that would define my legacy and my relationship with the Crawford family forever. 6 months after my public reconciliation with my family, I'd been approached by Winnie James, an acclaimed documentary filmmaker. "I want to tell your story," Winnie had said. "The full story, not just the disownment and the award, but the 50 years in between, the struggle, the perseverance, the art you created, the life you built." "Why?" I'd asked. Because your story matters, Winnie said simply. It matters to young artists who are facing family rejection. It matters to anyone who's ever had to choose between their dreams and their family's expectations. It matters to people who need to know that you can survive abandonment and still create something meaningful. And honestly, Winnie added, it matters to families who need to understand the long-term consequences of rejecting their children for following unconventional paths. I'd agreed to the documentary. And for the past 18 months, Winnie and her team had filmed me, working in my studio, teaching students, speaking at events, and reflecting on my life and career. They'd also interviewed my siblings, my nephews and nieces, art critics, fellow artists, and some of the scholarship recipients who'd been helped by the fund bearing my name. The documentary, titled Buried Names, The Zenobia Crawford Story, was premiering tonight at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I was nervous. The theater was packed. Over 800 people filled the seats: journalists, art world figures, family members, scholarship recipients, and film enthusiasts. I sat in the front row with Sterling and several of my other nephews and nieces. My siblings, Dovie, Artie, and Royal, sat a few rows back. We'd agreed they should attend, but we'd also agreed to maintain some physical distance. Our relationship over the past 2 years had been complicated, cordial but not close. They'd continued making gestures, donations to arts programs in my name, public statements supporting young artists, invitations to family events. I'd acknowledged their efforts but maintained boundaries. The lights dimmed. The documentary began. For the next 2 hours, I watched my life unfold on screen. The opening showed me in my studio, surrounded by my work, talking about what art meant to me. Art is how I survived, I said in the footage. When my family abandoned me, when I was alone and struggling, art gave me purpose. It gave me a reason to keep going. The documentary then went back to the beginning. My childhood in Charleston, my family's expectations, my decision to go to art school, and the disownment that followed. Winnie had found the actual legal letter my family had sent me in 1971. It appeared on screen, and I heard gasps from the audience as they read the cold, formal language disowning an 18-year-old girl. The film showed my early struggles in New York, the poverty, the multiple jobs, the rejection from galleries. It included interviews with people who'd known me then, who remembered how hard I'd worked. Then came my first breakthrough in 1985, the beginning of my career, and the slow build of my reputation over 35 years. Throughout, the documentary kept returning to one theme: that I'd built this entire life and career while my family pretended I didn't exist. The most powerful section came when Winnie interviewed my siblings. In the documentary, each of my siblings was interviewed separately. They'd clearly been coached to be honest, and the results were devastating. Dovie went first. I've spent 2 years trying to understand why we did what we did, Dovie said on screen. And the truth is, we were cowards. Our father made a decision to disown Zenobia, and instead of standing up for our sister, we went along with it. But it was more than just going along with it, Dovie continued. We actively participated. We removed her from family photos. We told people we only had 2 siblings. Every time someone asked about her, we lied. And you know the worst part? Dovie asked, tears visible. After a few years, it became easy. We'd told the lie so many times that we almost believed it ourselves. Zenobia became like a dream we'd had, something that maybe never really existed. Except she did exist, Dovie concluded. She was real, she was struggling, she was building an incredible career, and we missed all of it because we were too proud to admit we'd been wrong. Artie's interview was equally honest. When Zenobia won that award and became famous overnight, my first thought wasn't "I'm proud of my sister," Artie admitted. It was, "This is going to be a problem." That tells you everything about who I'd become. I'd spent 50 years telling people I had 2 siblings, Artie continued. Suddenly, I had to explain why there was this famous artist sister I'd never mentioned. And instead of being honest, instead of admitting we'd disowned her, I tried to control the narrative. I called her and pretended we'd always been proud of her, Artie said, shame clear in his voice. I showed up at her house uninvited. I threatened her with lawsuits when she wanted to tell her story. I did everything except what I should have done, which was apologize. It took my own children threatening to disown me to finally make me understand, Artie concluded. My son Sterling told me, "You erased your sister. We'll erase you unless you make this right." That's when I finally got it. Royal's interview was perhaps the most emotional. I'm a doctor, Royal said. I've taken an oath to do no harm, but I did harm, profound, lasting harm to my own sister. I helped erase her existence for 50 years. And the thing is, Royal continued, I knew it was wrong. Even at the time, even when I was young and following my father's lead, I knew it was wrong. But I did it anyway because it was easier than standing up to family pressure. I think about all the milestones I missed, Royal said, his voice breaking. Her first gallery show, her career breakthroughs, her struggles and triumphs. I could have been there. I could have been a supportive brother. Instead, I was someone who pretended she didn't exist. When she became famous and I saw her work for the first time, I was overwhelmed, Royal concluded. Not just by the quality, though it's extraordinary, but by what it represented. 50 years of creating art despite having no family support. 50 years of proving us wrong. 50 years of being someone we should have been proud of all along. Watching these interviews in the theater, I felt complicated emotions. Anger at the 50 years of erasure, but also a strange kind of closure at seeing my siblings finally, truly understand what they'd done. The most moving section of the documentary featured interviews with young artists who'd received Zenobia Crawford Art Scholarships. Hope Martinez, the young woman I'd met at the scholarship announcement, spoke about her experience. My parents told me I was throwing my life away by choosing art, Hope said. They said I'd end up poor and miserable. When they disowned me, I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was making a terrible mistake. Then I received the Zenobia Crawford Scholarship, Hope continued. And for the first time since my family rejected me, I felt like someone believed in me. Like someone understood that art wasn't a foolish dream, it was a valid path. Zenobia's story gave me hope, Hope concluded. If she could survive 50 years of family rejection and still become a legend, then maybe I could survive too. Another scholarship recipient, a young man named Homer Reeves, shared a similar story. I'm from a small town in Alabama, Homer said. Being an artist wasn't just impractical there, it was seen as suspicious, especially for a black kid from a working-class family. My father told me I needed a real career, Homer continued. When I insisted on art school, he said I was no longer his son. That hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced. But then I learned about Zenobia Crawford, Homer said, about how she'd been disowned and erased and had still built this incredible career. That changed everything for me. It showed me that family rejection doesn't have to be the end of your story, Homer concluded. It can be the beginning of building something even more meaningful. The documentary showed that over the past 2 years, the scholarship fund had helped 73 young artists attend art schools despite family rejection or lack of support. 73 lives changed because my family had finally chosen to do something right. The documentary concluded with footage from 6 months ago, a conversation between Winnie the filmmaker and me in my studio. Do you regret the path you chose? Winnie asked on screen. No, I said firmly. Going to art school, building this career, those were the right choices for me. I regret that my family couldn't support those choices, but I don't regret making them. Have you forgiven your family? Winnie asked. I paused for a long moment before answering. I've accepted their apology, I said carefully. I appreciate the gestures they've made, the scholarship fund, the public acknowledgement, the attempts at making amends. But forgiveness, that's complicated. Forgiveness would require me to let go of 50 years of pain, I continued. To forget the birthdays they missed, the struggles they ignored, the decades of erasure. I'm not sure I can do that. But what I can do, I said, is move forward. I can build relationships with my nephews and nieces who weren't part of the erasure. I can appreciate that my siblings finally told the truth, and I can focus on the life and legacy I've built rather than dwelling on what they took from me. So you're at peace? Winnie asked. I'm at peace with myself, I clarified. With my choices, my career, my life. Whether I'm at peace with my family is less clear. But I've learned something important. Peace doesn't require forgiveness. It just requires acceptance. Acceptance that what happened, happened. That I can't change the past. But I can control how I move forward, I concluded. And I'm choosing to move forward focused on creating art, mentoring young artists, and building a legacy that matters, not to my biological family, but to the community of artists who actually supported me. The documentary ended with footage of me painting in my studio, the camera slowly pulling back to reveal the 50 years of artwork surrounding me, evidence of a life fully lived despite abandonment. The final words on screen: Zenobia Crawford, artist, teacher, legend, a name that was buried but refused to stay buried. The lights came up. The audience stood and applauded for 5 full minutes. After the screening, there was a reception in the theater lobby. I was surrounded by people, journalists asking questions, artists expressing admiration, scholarship recipients thanking me. Sterling approached with several of my other nephews and nieces. Aunt Zenobia, that was powerful, Sterling said. Seeing the full story like that, I understand now why you've kept your distance from our parents. They hurt you in ways we're just beginning to comprehend, Sterling's sister Pearlie added. And while we appreciate that they're trying to make amends, we understand that some damage can't be undone. Thank you for understanding, I said. That means a lot. We wanted to tell you something, Sterling said. The younger generation, all 12 of us, have decided to change how we approach family. What do you mean? I asked. We're breaking the pattern, Pearlie explained. The Crawford family tradition of cutting off members who don't conform, who make inappropriate choices, who embarrass the family name, we're ending that. We've created what we're calling the Crawford Family Covenant, Sterling continued. A document that all of us have signed committing to never disown, erase, or reject family members for following their own paths. We can disagree with choices, Pearlie said. We can have different values, but we will never do what was done to you. We will never bury someone's name. Sterling handed me a framed document. It was the covenant they'd described, signed by all 12 members of the younger Crawford generation. At the top, it read, "In honor of Zenobia Crawford, who survived what should never have happened, we commit to doing better." I felt tears forming. This is beautiful, thank you. We also wanted to ask you something, Sterling said. Would you be willing to be the honorary head of our generation? Not of the older Crawford family, we understand why you wouldn't want that, but of us, the ones trying to build something different. We want your guidance, Pearlie added. Your wisdom, your example of how to live with integrity even when it's hard. I looked at these young people, my nephews and nieces, who were trying so hard to do better than their parents had. I would be honored, I said. Later that evening, as the reception was winding down, my 3 siblings approached me together. We hadn't spoken directly in months, communicating only through occasional emails. But tonight, they wanted to talk. Zenobia, the documentary was difficult to watch, Dovie began. I imagine it was, I said neutrally. Seeing it all laid out like that, the legal disownment, the 50 years of erasure, the struggles you went through, Artie continued. It made us confront what we did in a way we hadn't before. You confronted it 2 years ago when you apologized publicly, I pointed out. We acknowledged it, Royal corrected. But seeing the full scope of it, watching you describe the loneliness, hearing the scholarship recipients talk about family rejection, that made us truly understand. We wanted to tell you, Dovie said, that we know our apology and our gestures don't fix what we did. They can't give you back 50 years. They can't undo the pain we caused. But we want you to know that we're genuinely trying to be better, Artie added. Not just publicly for reputation management, but privately as people. I've been in therapy for a year, Royal said. working on understanding how I could participate in erasing my own sister, trying to become someone who would never do something like that again. We all have, Dovey confirmed. Individual therapy and family therapy, trying to understand and change the patterns that led to what we did to you. That's good, I said. You should do that work, not for me but for yourselves and your children. Is there any chance, Artie asked hesitantly, that we could build some kind of relationship, not erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen, but moving forward? I thought about it carefully before responding. I honestly don't know, I said. What you did, burying my name, erasing my existence for 50 years, that's not something I can just move past. But, I continued, I can appreciate that you're trying to change, that you've apologized publicly, established the scholarship fund, supported your children's relationships with me, and are doing personal work to understand and change. Those things don't earn forgiveness, I clarified, but they do show me that maybe, eventually, we could build something, not the sibling relationship we could have had. That's gone forever, but maybe something new, something honest. We'll take that, Dovey said, tears in her eyes. Whatever you're willing to give us, we'll take it. Then here's what I propose, I said. We start small, occasional emails, maybe coffee a few times a year when I'm in Charleston, no expectations of deep connection, just seeing if we can build something from this complicated truth. And if we can't, Royal asked. Then we stay cordial but distant, I said. Which is better than what we had for 50 years, complete erasure, but nowhere near what we lost by your choices. That's fair, Artie agreed. One more thing, I said. I need you to understand that your relationship with me will never be the priority. Your children, my nephews and nieces, they're my priority. They weren't part of what you did. They're trying to do better, and I'm investing my time and energy in building relationships with them. We understand, Dovey said, and we're grateful that you're willing to be in their lives, even if you're not really in ours. Good, I said. Then we have an understanding. 6 months after the documentary premiered, I was invited to do something I'd never imagined. A solo exhibition at the Charleston Museum of Art. Charleston, my hometown, the city I'd left 50 years ago and hadn't returned to since. The museum wanted to show my work to the community that had once rejected me. They wanted Charleston to see what one of their own had accomplished after being disowned and erased. I accepted the invitation. The opening reception was attended by over 600 people, the largest opening in the museum's history. Charleston's art community, social elite, and general public all came to see the work of the artist the Crawford family had buried. My siblings attended but kept a respectful distance, understanding this wasn't about them. My nephews and nieces were there, proud and supportive. During my speech at the opening, I addressed Charleston directly. 50 years ago, I left this city, I began. I left because I chose art school over family expectations, and my family responded by disowning me, erasing me, pretending I'd never existed. For decades, I wondered if I'd made the right choice, I continued. If following my dreams had been worth losing my family, if the art I was creating mattered enough to justify the sacrifice. Tonight, standing here in my hometown, surrounded by 50 years of my work, I have my answer, I said. Yes, it was worth it. Not because fame or awards validate my choice, I clarified, but because I lived authentically. I created work that mattered to me. I built a life based on my values, not someone else's expectations. And in doing so, I continued, I've hopefully shown other young people who face family rejection that you can survive it, that you can build something meaningful. That being erased doesn't mean you stop existing. It just means you have to insist on your own existence. My family buried my name, I concluded. But I dug it back up. I made it mean something. I turned erasure into art, pain into beauty, rejection into resilience. And now, Charleston, the city that knew me as the Crawford daughter who was disowned, gets to see me as Zenobia Crawford, the artist, the legend, the name that refused to stay buried. The audience gave a standing ovation. Later that night, I stood alone in the exhibition gallery, looking at 50 years of my artwork displayed in my hometown. Sterling found me there. "How does it feel?" Sterling asked. "Being back in Charleston, being celebrated instead of erased." "Strange," I admitted. "Validating, but strange. Part of me is that 18-year-old girl who was disowned, who left this city believing her family thought she was worthless." "You proved them wrong," Sterling said. "I proved them wrong about art being worthless," I corrected. "But I never needed to prove my own worth. That was always there, whether they acknowledged it or not." "That's a powerful distinction," Sterling observed. "It's one I learned slowly," I said. "For years, I thought if I could just be successful enough, famous enough, respected enough, then my family would regret what they did. Then I'd feel vindicated. But when I actually became famous, and they did panic and regret their choices," I continued, "I realized their regret didn't change anything. It didn't give me back 50 years. It didn't heal the wounds they'd caused." "What did heal you?" Sterling asked. "Building a life that mattered," I said. "Creating art I was proud of, mentoring young artists, building real relationships with people who valued me for who I actually was." "And now," Sterling asked, "after everything, the award, the exposure, the apology, the documentary, this exhibition, where are you emotionally?" "At peace," I said. "Not with my family's choices. Those were wrong and will always be wrong, but at peace with my own choices, with the life I built, with the legacy I'm leaving." "You're leaving quite a legacy," Sterling said. "The scholarship fund has already changed dozens of lives. The documentary is being used in art schools to teach about perseverance. Your work is in major museums, and you've inspired countless people who have faced family rejection." "That matters more than any family reconciliation could," I said, "because it means my pain wasn't wasted. It became something that helps others." "I'm grateful to be part of your life now," Sterling said. "Even though I can't change what my father did, I'm grateful I get to know you." "I'm grateful too," I said. "You and your generation give me hope that the Crawford family can become something better than what it was." We stood together in silence, looking at the art that told the story of my life. A life built from rejection, a name resurrected from burial, a legend created not by family support, but by sheer determination to exist despite erasure. At 76 years old, I received one final honor, the Presidential Medal of Arts, awarded by the President of the United States for lifetime contributions to American culture. The ceremony was held at the White House. My nephews and nieces attended. My siblings were invited but sat in the back. Understanding their role in my story was complicated. When the president placed the medal around my neck, she spoke about my journey. "Zenobia Crawford represents the best of the American spirit," the president said. "Faced with rejection from her own family, she persevered. She created art that speaks to the human experience. She built a legacy that will inspire generations. Her story teaches us that families should support dreams, not crush them," the president continued. "That rejection doesn't define us. Our response to rejection defines us. And that a buried name can become legendary if the person bearing it refuses to stay buried." After the ceremony, a journalist asked me, "Ms. Crawford, your family is here today. Have you finally forgiven them?" I thought carefully before answering. "I've accepted their apology," I said. "I appreciate the changes they've made. The scholarship fund they established has changed lives. Their children, my nephews and nieces, have become important people in my life." "But forgiveness," I continued, "that's complicated. What they did wasn't a single action. It was 50 years of consistent erasure, 50 years of choices to pretend I didn't exist." "I can move forward without dwelling on that pain," I said. "I can appreciate their efforts to make amends. I can build relationships with the next generation. But I can't pretend the past didn't happen, and I can't say I've fully forgiven something so profound. What I can say," I concluded, "is that I've forgiven myself. For years, I wondered if choosing art had been selfish, if I should have just conformed to family expectations. But I finally understand. Choosing authenticity over conformity isn't selfish. It's necessary. My family buried my name because I wouldn't be who they wanted me to be, I said. I became a legend by insisting on being exactly who I was. That's the lesson I want to leave. Be yourself, even when the cost is high, because the cost of not being yourself is even higher. What an incredible journey. From disowned 18-year-old to 76-year-old presidential medal recipient. Zenobia's family panicked when she became famous, but she exposed their 50-year erasure. They apologized publicly, established a $5 million scholarship fund, went to therapy. The younger generation created a covenant to never repeat their parents' mistakes. Zenobia built relationships with her nephews and nieces while keeping distance from her siblings. She returned to Charleston triumphant for an exhibition. She received the Presidential Medal of Arts. Her buried name became legendary. This story proves that following your dreams is worth the cost. Family rejection doesn't define your worth. You can build meaningful life without family support. Authenticity matters more than conformity. A buried name can become legendary through persistence. Legacy comes from impact, not family approval. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to this channel for more empowering stories. Smash that like button. Turn on notifications for new content. Drop a comment. Would you have forgiven the family? Have you ever had to choose dreams over family expectations? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Australia, Trinidad, India, Philippines? Let me know. Remember, if your family doesn't support your dreams, build a family of choice. Create meaning despite rejection. Insist on your own existence even when others try to erase you. Your name, your identity, belongs to you, not to people who want to bury it. 73 young artists have scholarships because Zenobia refused to stay buried. Countless people have been inspired by her story. That's legacy. That's what happens when you turn rejection into resilience and pain into purpose. Thank you for following this powerful journey from burial to legend. May Zenobia's story inspire you to live authentically, create boldly, and refuse to let anyone, even family, define your worth. Until the next story, stay strong, believe in your dreams, and remember that being yourself is always worth it.